Let me walk you through the traditional approach of exception handling. It is traditional try catch block, and in the catch block we return a status code 500 internal server error along with the exception message. Here is another method which is a put method, and here we can cover everything. So the first one is this one: if id does not equals to person update dot id, it means id passed through URL or id passed through the body should be matched. If it does not match, we will return bad request along with this message id mismatch. Now here, if person is null, then we will return not found exception along with this message. And here we are handling the exception where we are returning the 500 internal server error. Now let's run this project. So let's pass here 11 and here it will be 1, so it should throw id mismatch, that it is throwing id mismatch, and it is 400 bad request. Now if I type here 11, then let's see what happens. It is saying person with id 11 not found, and it is returning the error message 404 not found. Let's handle one more case here. Let me uncomment this, and it is a custom exception which I have created here. We are basically throwing invalid operation exception. This is a demo exception. So I'm trying to mimic the 500 internal server error. So let's check this one also. Now let's change it to 1 and 1. Now if I click here, then we can say you have been noticing here 500 internal server error, and this is a demo exception. So this one is a traditional approach. We have another way to return error messages which is more descriptive, which is called problem details, and this approach is defined in RFC 7807. You can check out in the internet about that, so I'm not going more into this. So let's see how we can return problem details instead of these not found or status code. Instead of returning bad request, here we are returning the problem, and it have following parameters: type, title, detail, and status code. In the type we are saying it is a bad request exception. In the title we are saying an error is occurred, and in detail we are passing id does not match, and status code will be 400. Similarly here, for the not found exception, we are returning problem with type not found exception, with title error is occurred, with this detail person id it does not found, and status code 404. And in the catch block we are returning problem with type internal server exception, and error is occurred, detail is exception message, and status code is 500. So let's run this guy and let's see what happens. So let me change it to 1. So we are trying to get this 400 status code. So here we are getting the same amount of thing: type this, title this, status this, detail this, and we are also getting a trace id here. Let's change it to 11. Let's see what happens if id does not found. So here type is not found exception, title is this, and status is 404, and this one. So this way is more descriptive. Here we have much more detail. Similarly, we can also get the 500 internal server error, so I'm not going to test it. That should be similar. Now we can add more details to our problem detail. For that we need to add these line in the program.cs class. So builder.services.add problem details, and we are customizing these things. Here we are creating the instance, and instance is the URL of the method which is causing the problem. And in this line we are adding the request ID, and here we are adding the trace ID. So let's run this, and here you can see we have the instance which is put method API people, and ID is 11, and this one is request ID. So these are the additional details we have added here. Right now we are handling exception in the controller. So if we have n controllers and n methods, then we have to log these exceptions in the n places. We can also log them in a single place. Let's see how we can do this. So first of all, we need to define our custom exceptions. So create exceptions folder, and here we need to create these two exceptions. First one is bad request exception, which will inherit the exception class, and here we will have the constructor which is accepting a string message, and in the base constructor we are passing the message. Similarly, we can define the not found exception, and now we need to create a class called custom exception handler, which will implement the IExceptionHandler. So this interface implement this method try handle async, which takes these arguments HTTP context, exception, and cancellation token. So now we need to implement this try handle async method. So first we are going to inject the iProblemDetails service, and we also need to inject iLogger service, and here we are injecting them through the constructor injection. Now let's go to the try handle async. So first we are logging the error, then we are retrieving status code and problem detail from this get problem detail and status code method, where we are passing the exception, and here we have defined this method. In this method simply we have put a switch case. If we have bad request exception, then we are returning the status code 400 bad request with this problem detail, which have these properties: status this, 400 bad request, title this, and detail, and type. And this type has been copied from the RFC documents. Now if we have not found exception, then we will return status code 404 not found, comma, problem details this, and for the default case we will return 500 internal server error and this problem detail. So if case is default, we will return 500 status code, and if it is bad request exception, then we will return this. If it is not found exception, we will return this. So basically we are returning the tuple from here, and in the tuple we will return int comma problem detail. So int will hold the status code and problem detail will hold the object of problem detail class. So in this way we can get our status code and problem detail from the exception. Now we have our status code and problem detail. We can write http context.response.status code equals to status code. So we are directly writing the response, and we will return problem details service dot try write async new problem detail context, where http context equals to http context, problem details equals to problem details, exception equals to exception. Now we have defined our custom exception handler class, Now we can go to the program.cs file. First we have to register the custom exception handler. So builder.services.add exception handler, custom exception handler, the class which we have created earlier, and we also have to map it. So app.use exception handler, make sure you have defined these two lines, otherwise you are going to get error. Now we are done from here. Now let's go to the person controller, and earlier I have named it to do controller. That was a mistake. Now I have renamed it to the person controller. Okay, that's not a big of deal. Let's go to the main logic here. Update person method. So if IDs does not match, then we will throw new bad request exception with this message. If person is null, we can throw not found exception along with this message. And we have removed try catch block from here, and here I am also throwing the demo exception so that I can mimic the 500 error. Let's check if everything is working as expected or not. So first let's check the scenario of ID mismatch. So here you can see IDs do not match, 400 bad request. Now let's say here you can see 404 not found, person with ID this, and instance trace ID, request ID, and type. Okay, now let's change it to 1 and change it to 1, and you can see here we have 500 status, and put API people 1, and here is the type, and title is server error. Now do not worry about the code, just understand the concept. You can get the source code from my GitHub repository. Link will be available in the description box. If you find this video helpful, then please hit the like button. Make sure to subscribe this channel to get more videos like this. That's it for now. See you next time.